Emily, this house, it was always meant to be mine. Sign the divorce papers and leave. Nathan's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth that once drew me to him. I stood in the living room, the walls echoing his harsh words, feeling a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Our marriage, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a battlefield. You can't be serious, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is our home, Nathan, not just yours. He smirked, a gesture so unlike the man I had fallen in love with. Our home? Emily, wake up. You're just a housewife. I've been the one paying for everything. I clenched my fists, feeling a storm brewing inside me. A housewife? Is that all I am to you now? I retorted. Nathan walked closer, his presence overbearing. Exactly. You've done nothing but live off my hard work. It's time you realize your place. I could feel my parents' worried glances from the corner of the room. They had come over for dinner, unaware they'd be witnessing the collapse of my marriage. I didn't want them to see me like this, broken, belittled by the man I once adored. Fine, Nathan, I said, my voice laced with a newfound resolve. I'll sign your papers. But remember this, you will regret it. He laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Regret? Emily, you'll be the one with regrets. I turned away, my parents following silently. As I walked out of that room, out of the life I had built with Nathan, I knew this was not the end. It was a beginning of my fight, my retribution. As I sat in my small but cozy apartment, the memories of my past flooded back, painting a stark contrast to the present. I was the cherished only child of my parents, born after years of their struggling with infertility. Their joy knew no bounds when I came into their lives, a sentiment echoed in every childhood photo, every birthday celebration. Emily, you were always the center of our world, my mother used to say with a gentle smile. My parents, though not wealthy, spared no effort in providing for me. They encouraged my education, my love for reading, and nurtured my dreams. But with their sacrifice came an unspoken burden, the pressure to find happiness, to make their efforts worthwhile. Meeting Nathan seemed like fulfilling that unspoken promise. He was charming, attentive, and shared a similar background. An only child with aging parents. Our connection was instant, our conversations filled with laughter and shared aspirations. Our wedding was a joyous affair, celebrated with tears and blessings from both families. But the fairy tale started to crumble soon after. Nathan's true colors began to surface once the honeymoon phase faded. His sweet words turned into sharp commands, his once admiring glances now carried a hint of disdain. You need to be more efficient around the house, Emily. Look at how my mother managed everything despite her job, Nathan would often say, comparing me unfavorably to his mother. His relentless criticism wasn't just confined to household chores. He started controlling our finances, giving me a meager allowance, scoffing whenever I suggested I could return to work. Work? What for? You can barely manage the house, he'd sneer, his words cutting deeper each time. As I sat there, reminiscing, anger boiled within me. How had I not seen the signs? How had I allowed myself to become this person, a shadow of my former self, living in a loveless, controlling marriage? The realization was bitter, but it sparked a determination within me. I will not let this be my story, I whispered to myself, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was time for Nathan to see the real Emily, the woman who wasn't just a beloved child or a submissive wife. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The days turned into months, and the love that once seemed endless within the walls of our home slowly twisted into a suffocating trap. Each morning began with Nathan's cold demands echoing in the kitchen. Remember, Emily, dinner needs to be perfect. My colleagues are coming over tonight, Nathan would command, his tone leaving no room for protest. On one such evening, as I meticulously set the table for Nathan's guests, my hands trembled with suppressed anger. The sound of laughter and casual conversation filled the living room, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Emily, this steak is slightly overcooked, Nathan commented loudly, in front of his colleagues, a smirk playing on his lips. His words, seemingly trivial, were a deliberate jab at my efforts. I forced a smile, replying, I'll make sure it's better next time. But inside, I was screaming. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone who enjoyed belittling his wife, showcasing his dominance in this skewed power play we called our marriage. The evenings when Nathan's parents visited were even more challenging. They treated our home as their own, never acknowledging my efforts to make them comfortable. Nathan, on the other hand, would spare no expense to please them, often at the cost of our own needs. "Why can't we invite my parents sometimes?" I once dared to ask. Nathan's response was swift and harsh. "Why should I spend my money on your parents? They're not my responsibility." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the depth of Nathan's selfishness and disregard for me and my family. He had created a world where only his desires mattered, where I was nothing more than a silent participant in his scripted play of domestic bliss. But no more. The fire of rebellion was kindling within me. I was tired of being a mere puppet, tired of the disrespect and emotional torment. It was time for Nathan to see that I wasn't just his obedient wife. I was a woman with a voice, a woman who deserved respect. "I will not be broken," I whispered into the darkness, my resolve strengthening. The seeds of my plan were already taking root. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. The day my parents' house was caught in a devastating fire marked the beginning of my rebellion. The house, a symbol of my childhood memories, now stood partially destroyed. My parents, though safe, were shaken and disoriented. This was more than just a building, it was a repository of cherished memories and love. I remember standing amidst the charred remains, my mother's words echoing in my ears. "This house held so much of our life, Emily. Letting it go feels like losing a part of ourselves." That night, I lay awake, pondering over my parents' plight and my own stifled existence under Nathan's rule. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan not just to secure my parents' future, but also to free myself from Nathan's tyranny. The next day, I approached Nathan, my voice steady but laced with faux naivety. "Nathan, my parents' house? It's beyond repair. I was thinking of buying them a new one, using my savings." His reaction was predictably self-centered. "Your savings? Well, as long as it's not my money." But there was more to my plan than he knew. The house I was considering for my parents was under renovation, set to be a perfect ruse for my greater scheme. Weeks passed, and the day arrived to help my parents move. Nathan, believing the house to be a simple purchase, had no idea of the trap I was setting. His arrogance was my advantage. As I orchestrated the move, Nathan arrived unexpectedly, declaring ownership of the house and demanding a divorce. It was the moment I had been waiting for. "Fine, Nathan, you shall have your divorce," I said calmly, hiding the triumphant smile that threatened to break through. Little did he know, the house he so arrogantly claimed was not the real deal. The actual property, a modest but comfortable home, was waiting, its location a secret kept from Nathan. As I left with my parents, the look of confusion and defeat on Nathan's face was the first victory in my silent war against him. But it was just the beginning. The real retribution was yet to come. In the days following the move, I worked meticulously, my actions cloaked in secrecy. Nathan, oblivious to my intentions, basked in his perceived victory. It was time to unveil the truth and shatter his delusions. I recall the day vividly. Nathan had called, his voice dripping with condescension. "So, Emily, how does it feel to be back at your parents' old cramped house?" I smiled into the phone, a cold, calculated smile. "Actually, Nathan, we're quite comfortable. You see, the house you claimed was just a temporary arrangement. The real property is elsewhere, safe from your greed." There was a pause, a silence filled with his dawning realization. "What are you saying, Emily? That can't be." "Oh, but it is. And about the divorce papers you so kindly left for me, I've already filed them," I continued, my voice steady and strong. Nathan's reaction was a mix of confusion and anger, a stark contrast to his usual arrogant demeanor. "This isn't over, Emily. You can't just—" But I cut him off, no longer willing to endure his tirades. "It is over, Nathan, and let me remind you, I'm not just the meek housewife you thought you married. I am a lawyer, well-versed in the law. Your attempts to intimidate me are futile." His silence on the other end was the sweetest revenge, a validation of my newfound empowerment. The years of belittlement and control were coming to an end, and I was the orchestrator of his downfall. As I hung up the phone, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had turned the tables on Nathan, using his arrogance against him. It was a victory, not just for me, but for every moment I had felt insignificant in his shadow. The path ahead was clear. I would rebuild my life, free from Nathan's oppression, and stand tall, a woman reborn from the ashes of a marriage that had sought to diminish her. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. My phone buzzed, and Nathan's name flashed on the screen. Bracing myself, I answered, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and resolve. "Emily, this is madness. You can't do this to me." Nathan's voice was frantic, a stark contrast to his usual composed and condescending tone. "Oh, but I can, and I have, Nathan," I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. "You thought you could walk over me, take what's mine, and discard me like I was nothing. You were wrong." He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the cogs turning in his mind as he tried to comprehend the gravity of his situation. "Emily, listen, we can work this out. Let's forget about the divorce and start over," he pleaded, his voice laced with false sweetness. The suggestion was laughable. "Start over? After everything you've done? No, Nathan. I deserve better, and so do my parents." I could feel his desperation through the phone. "But the house, my reputation, my career, you're ruining everything." "That's the consequence of your actions, Nathan. You chose this path when you underestimated me, when you treated me and my family with such disregard," I said firmly. The call ended with Nathan's pleas fading into a defeated silence. It was a victory, not just legally but morally and emotionally. I had stood up to the bully who had made my life miserable, and I had won. In the following weeks, Nathan's life unraveled. His attempts to control and manipulate had backfired, leaving him to face the harsh reality of his actions. His once flourishing career took a hit as the details of our divorce and his behavior became the talk of the town. As for me, I found solace in my parents' company, in the small yet comfortable home that was truly ours. I had reclaimed my life, emerging stronger and more determined. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, free from the shadows of a loveless marriage. Sitting in the sunlit living room of the modest house that was now a sanctuary for my parents and me, I reflected on the tumultuous journey I had endured. The walls, freshly painted, seemed to symbolize a new beginning, a stark contrast to the oppressive walls of the house I once shared with Nathan. It had been several weeks since the divorce was finalized, and with each passing day, the weight of my past life lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and self-assuredness. Nathan's attempts to reach out had ceased, his once looming presence now just a distant memory. My parents, who had witnessed my transformation, were my pillars of strength. "We always knew you had this strength in you, Emily," my father said one evening, his eyes brimming with pride. I had returned to work, immersing myself in the world of law, a world where I was respected and valued for my intellect and skills. The stark contrast to my life with Nathan was both liberating and empowering, but it wasn't just about reclaiming my professional identity. It was about rediscovering who I was beyond the roles of daughter, wife, or victim. I was Emily, a woman of resilience and determination. One day as I sat in a cafe, lost in thought, a familiar face approached me. It was John, an old friend and colleague. "Emily, it's been a while. You look different, happier." His words made me realize how far I had come. "I am happier, John. I've come to understand that sometimes letting go is the first step to finding yourself." Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and as he left, he said, "Let's not wait another lifetime to catch up again, Emily." As I walked back home, I felt a glimmer of something new, a possibility of a future that was mine to shape. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for new beginnings, for new love. But this time on my terms. The journey had been long and arduous, but as I stood in my parents' garden watching the sunset, I realized that every challenge had led me to this moment of tranquility and self-discovery. The shadows of my past had finally lifted, giving way to the warm, hopeful light of a new dawn.